Imagine being trapped, unable to move, as hundreds of angry strangers surround you, your head and hands locked tight in wooden restraints. The crowd grows restless. Someone hurls a rotten apple that explodes against your face. Then comes the urine, the stones, the screaming, and you realize this nightmare has only just begun. Because you'll be here for 3 days straight. This was the terrifying reality of medieval justice, where public humiliation wasn't just punishment, it was entertainment. Welcome to the brutal world of the pillory and stocks, where criminals became human targets in a twisted game that could end in death. But here's what will shock you most. Some of the criminals locked in these devices had committed crimes so minor, you probably broke the same laws this week without even knowing it. The year is 1351, and Thomas the baker stands trembling in the town square of Chester, England. His crime? Selling bread that was 2 ounces lighter than the legal weight. In our world, that might earn him a fine. In his world, it's about to earn him something far worse. The wooden pillory looms before him, like a medieval monster. 2 heavy oak boards, hinged together, with 3 circular holes carved through them. The executioner forces Thomas to kneel, positioning his neck in the center hole, his wrists in the smaller ones on either side. The top board slams down with a thunderous crack, trapping him completely. Thomas can barely breathe. His neck is compressed, his hands already going numb from the tight wooden restraints. But the physical discomfort is nothing compared to what comes next, because the crowd is gathering, and they're not here to show mercy. The pillory wasn't just about punishment. It was about power. Medieval authorities understood something modern psychology has proven: public shaming can be more devastating than physical pain. But they took it to extremes we can barely comprehend today. Picture this scene unfolding in countless town squares across medieval Europe. The church bells ring, not for prayer, but to announce that the show is about to begin. Shopkeepers abandon their stalls, children run from their lessons, even nobles peer from their windows, eager for the spectacle. They come armed with ammunition, carefully saved for occasions like this. Rotten eggs, moldy vegetables, chamber pots full of human waste, and yes, stones. The medieval crowd didn't just throw things randomly, they had favorites. Rotten fish were particularly prized because the smell would linger for days. Spoiled milk created a nauseating film that attracted flies, and human excrement that carried the additional humiliation of disease and infection. But Thomas the baker's ordeal reveals something darker about medieval society. As the first projectile in a putrid turnip strikes his face, the crowd erupts in laughter. This isn't just justice to them, it's entertainment. It's a release valve for their own frustrations, their own powerlessness in a rigid social hierarchy. A woman pushes through the crowd, carrying a bucket that makes people step back and cover their noses. She's saved a week's worth of kitchen slop, rancid meat scraps, sour milk, moldy bread, just for this moment. She hurls the contents with practiced aim, and Thomas retches as the foul mixture coats his hair and runs down his trapped body. Hours pass. Thomas's neck is on fire from the wooden restraint. His hands have lost all feeling. But worse than the physical pain is the psychological torture. He can see the crowd, but he can't dodge what they throw. He can hear their insults, their laughter, their discussions about what to throw next, but he can't respond. He's been reduced to a human target, stripped of dignity, agency and hope. And this is only day 1 of his 3-day sentence. The stocks work differently but were equally brutal. Instead of trapping the head and hands, they secured the ankles, forcing the criminal to sit helplessly while their feet became targets. Picture Margaret the scold, locked in the stocks for the crime of disturbing the peace with her tongue, essentially arguing with her neighbors too loudly. Her feet are swollen and bleeding from the tight wooden restraints when a group of children approaches. In medieval times, there were no child protection laws, no concepts of appropriate behavior. These children, some as young as 6 or 7, have been given sharp stones by their parents. They're learning a lesson about social order, and Margaret's feet are their classroom. The stones strike with sickening thuds. Margaret screams, but that only encourages them. One boy finds a particularly sharp rock and aims for her toes. The crack of breaking bone echoes across the square, and Margaret's scream becomes something inhuman, something that haunts the nightmares of everyone present. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. The authorities didn't just use these devices for actual criminals. They used them to control society, to enforce conformity, to crush dissent. Consider the case of John the Miller in 1398. His crime wasn't theft or violence. He had spoken openly about the corruption of local officials, questioning why the Lord's taxes kept increasing while the roads remained impassable and the bridges crumbled. For this sedition, he earned a day in the pillory. But John's punishment reveals the true purpose of these devices. It wasn't really about his specific crime. It was about sending a message to everyone watching: question authority, and this could be you. Speak out, and you'll become the town's entertainment. The pillory was psychological warfare, designed to create a population too terrified to resist. The crowd that gathered for John was different. These weren't just random townspeople seeking entertainment. Many were the Lord's supporters, specifically there to make an example. They brought more than rotten food. They brought political rage. A merchant who had profited from the Lord's corrupt contracts throws a handful of sharp gravel at John's face, opening cuts that will scar for life. A tax collector's wife pours a bucket of icy water over him in the dead of winter, causing his body to convulse with hypothermia. And through it all, John can see neighbors in the crowd, people he's known for years, either participating in his torture or standing silently by, too afraid to defend him. By the time they release John from the pillory, he's a broken man. His spirit, his health, his place in the community, all destroyed. And that was exactly the point. The medieval mind didn't distinguish between justice and vengeance the way we do today. They believed that crime created a debt, not just to the victim, but to society itself. The public nature of pillory punishment was supposed to balance the scales by allowing the community to participate in retribution. But the system was hideously unfair. Wealthy criminals could often pay fines instead of facing the pillory. Poor criminals had no such option. A rich merchant who cheated customers might lose some coins. A poor baker who short-weighted bread would lose his dignity, his health, and sometimes his life. And the crimes that earned pillory time, many would seem absurd today. Selling ale without a license, charging too much for candles, being found in another town without proper papers, speaking a foreign language too loudly. For women, the crimes could be even more trivial: nagging their husbands, gossiping, or simply being too outspoken. The physical design of these devices was deliberately cruel. The pillory holes were sized to trap, not just restrain. Too small, and they cut off circulation. Too large, and the victim could slip free. Medieval craftsmen found the perfect size, just tight enough to cause constant pain and periodic panic when swelling made breathing difficult. The wood itself was chosen carefully. Oak was preferred because it didn't splinter easily. Splinters might allow escape or provide weapons. The surfaces were deliberately left rough to chafe against skin, and the height was calculated so that crowds could easily reach the victim with their projectiles while preventing any chance of defense. Weather made everything worse. Summer meant blazing sun with no shade, dehydration and swarms of insects attracted to the filth covering the victim. Winter meant hypothermia, frostbite, and the special agony of frozen waste slowly thawing on exposed skin. Rain turned the accumulated garbage into a putrid soup that pooled around the victim's body. But perhaps most terrifying was the unpredictability. Some crowds were content with rotten vegetables and verbal abuse. Others turned murderous. There was no way to know, as you were locked into position, whether you would survive the next few hours. Records from medieval courts reveal cases where pillory victims died from their injuries. Stones to the head caused fatal brain damage. Infected wounds from sharp objects led to sepsis. Dehydration and exposure killed others. Yet these deaths were rarely investigated as murders. They were seen as unfortunate but acceptable consequences of justice. The psychological impact often lasted longer than the physical wounds. Victims reported nightmares, an inability to be in crowds, and crippling shame that destroyed their social relationships. Many left their communities entirely after pillory punishment, becoming wanderers and outcasts. As you watch this video, remember that these weren't fictional monsters or movie villains locked in these devices. They were ordinary people: miners, bakers, merchants, housewives, farmers, whose lives were destroyed for crimes that often amounted to minor rule-breaking or simply annoying the wrong person. The pillory and stocks represent one of humanity's darkest chapters, a time when justice was indistinguishable from sadism, when entertainment meant watching fellow humans suffer, when power was maintained through terror and public humiliation. These devices were finally abolished in most of Europe during the 1800s, as changing ideas about human dignity and effective justice made them seem barbaric. But they had dominated public life for over 500 years, shaping countless generations' understanding of authority, conformity, and the price of stepping out of line. The next time you complain about modern legal systems, remember Thomas the Baker, Margaret the Scold, and John the Miller. Remember that justice without mercy isn't justice at all. It's just cruelty with official approval. What do you think? Could you have survived a day in the pillory? How do you think medieval people justified such brutal treatment of their neighbors? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this glimpse into medieval justice shocked you as much as it shocked me, smash that subscribe button for more dark chapters from history that will change how you see the world. And here's a question that will haunt you. What practices we consider normal today might future generations look back on with the same horror we feel about the pillory and stocks?